everybody. My name's Ashley. I live in Northwest Arkansas. I live with my husband and our daughter. She will be 10 in August. She is a competitive cheerleader. I'm a stay-at-home mom who's in grad school. Um, and there's not really much to my life other than trying to spread positivity and awareness and, help other people that are in need. Been through it, going through it. So grad school is really stressful, but it's super gratifying. So that's, not a whole lot. My husband is kind of in and out all the time. He's out of town working right now, has been for the past week and a half, and we have a week and a half left to go. So
So it must be sometimes a little bit difficult to have the house all to yourself. So how is it having your husband who's working outside of the country and you're there to navigate things at home?
it's difficult, definitely. Sometimes he's in the country, sometimes he's not in the country. In this case, he's in the country right now. Last week he was not. That was not the case. It is difficult because, like with our daughter, obviously I don't have that extra hand. We also are in the middle of moving into our forever home. So I'm kind of having to juggle all of that by myself as well. And so it's definitely a lot. And I will say that it takes a very specific human being. I don't know how I've learned to deal with it, but here we are. We've got a great life. We have a wonderful kid, and we make it work. We're happy, and it just we find a way to make it work. It's difficult. It is. It's straining. It's hard, but we make it work.
I know that the last time we spoke, it was more so about how you're presenting your family, right? In regards to your daughter and your husband and him being the stepfather of your daughter. And that gives you a unique perspective because I'll be
Right.
very honest with you. Ashley, there's like a lot of people who are around me who, when they look at that kind of dynamic, they're like, that's not necessarily for me, but you're able to make it work. So, what are some of the ways that you can make it work to catch everyone up to speed?
I mean, honestly, like that's really a hard question because I feel like everybody's dynamic is different. I will tell you this. It takes a really specific person to take on that much. Like in my husband's case, he went from never even having a girlfriend a day in his life to taking on a high strung girl with PTSD, family trauma, anxiety, and also came with it as a package deal with a child. And he took all of that in and he was like, okay. And, I think it's just everyone's dynamic is going to be different. And I feel like it's how you navigate. I think communication is very important. I think that's very key. I think you and your spouse partner need to be on the same page. If you're going to allow that person to be that sole secondary parent, I think that you need to give them grace and let them parent, trust them. You guys essentially have to parent together. I mean, yeah, he's not biologically her father, he is her father. And, like if he says no, then unless him and I can come to an agreement on it, then that's just it. Just like if I say no, unless we can come to an agreement on it, that's it. Like we're one combined force when it comes to parenting. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing when it comes to specific dynamics like that. But like I said, it's a very sensitive thing and it's very different for everybody. So I really think that you got to fill each other out. I will say my husband did not meet her for the first like 4 or 5 months of us dating. And so it took a while before I even introduced them. And he's just been daddy ever since. So I think it's just really specific. You have to really kind of be at peace with yourself. And that I think is the number one thing. That was my biggest hiccup was being at peace with myself and who I was. And once I got there, that's when I was like, I could breathe, if that makes sense. So, but like, I mean, everyone's dynamic is different. So I really think my best advice is just make sure that you guys can communicate, make sure that it's something that is going to work for you, because you never want to do that to a child and then throw them to the wayside. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I will agree with that because I know there's some people that setup, that family setup isn't for them, and that's perfectly fine because not everything is for everyone. And I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, like I've dated most of the people I've dated have always been a number of years older than me. Some have had children, some haven't.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I know that I don't want children. But if I were to date someone and they came as a package deal and they had a child, I wouldn't mind, especially if the child is older, because that child would have their father. And even though I would eventually meet them, depending on how serious it gets, I
Mm-hmm.
think women in general have done a good job at shielding their children from potential bad partners. Is that something you would agree with?
If you want me to be honest, I'm gonna have to say, where I'm from, no. The people that we associate ourselves with that are in that specific position, they are more mature people, and so they get around that. But I can say that the amount of, unfortunately, women that I know outweighs the amount of good women. And I do know a lot of really bad women that use their children as pawns, and it's not fair. Some of them have some weight to work with. Some of them really are just being super vindictive. And to me, I'm like, you ask my opinion, I'm going to tell you all you're doing is hurting the child. And that's my thing. Like, the people we run with, if they're in that dynamic, they co-parent very well together. And some people can say that's up for debate, and that could be a completely different conversation. But like, I've got a really good friend that I've known since middle school, and she co-parents with her ex-husband and his new wife, and like, her and her new husband are the godparents of their new child, and like, they spend holidays together and all types of stuff. And some people would say that's excessive, but you know what? That's their dynamic. That works for them, and I think that's healthy. All their kids are growing up. They have a biological mom, they have a bonus mom, and like, you can't ask for anything better. I mean, to me, it's just, nothing irks me more than somebody that uses their child as a pawn, because you're not thinking about your children, you're thinking about you. And that's just where I draw the line.
And I think that's
But
a big issue. You're right. I think that's a big issue. Like when I look at here in Canada, there's
mhm,
always this debate regarding who has the authority to say what is right for the child. And I would argue most people are going to say the parents, right? And then you bring us to the dynamic where you have changes not only in the schools when it comes to what the teachers or the staff wants to
mhm,
let the parents know in regards to their child, but now we have certain debates about, let's say, for example, like the different genders, like what's
right,
allowable in the washroom, what's allowable in the change room, what's allowable all around. And I think
right.
one of the missing components in that is that people sometimes try to cut out the parents from the conversation, especially when it's very young children and what they are going to be exposed to and what they shouldn't be exposed to. What are your thoughts on that?
So I know here in the United States, like, that's been a really huge thing that's been up for debate. Like, that's caused a lot of controversy here, because you know it's one of those things where, what age is it appropriate for this type of stuff to be introduced to our children? You live your life however you want to. That's not up to me to decide or judge. It's up to me to support you and be your friend, if like, you are somebody that does identify in that culture, or like, you understand where I'm going with that. But like, me having an almost 10-year-old daughter, so I'm not sure if they're doing this in Canada, but one thing that's kind of sparked a lot of controversy and a lot of, like, chatter through the mom group, especially like in our communities, is they're starting to install urinals in the female bathrooms, and that scares a lot of parents. And me as a mother myself, I have to say that I can't say I'm not a little bit worried about that, And again, live your life how you want to, but at what age is it appropriate? At what age do you say, okay, this is okay? It's okay for you to know about this. Like, their cognitive receptors at this age are not even remotely close to binding to understand any of the information we would have to give them. And that's just kind of where my issue is we're throwing big world issues and big world things at children that haven't even hit 13 years old yet. You know what I mean? Like, kids that don't have those cognitive receptors to understand what's going on. And so, we're about to have a lot of kids asking a lot of questions, and that's going to be hard for a lot of people. And I live in the South. I live in a very progressive Republican state, and people are not nice about stuff like that. And I can only see it getting worse from here. And I always try to keep the peace, but I don't know how it is in Canada up there with y'all, but down here in the States, especially in the South, people are really not happy about it.
I think the middle ground is no longer in the middle. It's either too far left or too far right. It's not
Yeah, there's no
in the
gray area.
center.
There's no gray
Yeah.
area anymore. It's either black or white. Like, there's no gray area with that anymore at all. You're right.
Yeah. And I wonder what would happen if some people started to take a more fierce stance. Like, let's say, for example, you had one side say that, hey, we absolutely are for this. And then you have another side saying that we're absolutely against it. But there isn't the
Right.
people in the middle saying that, okay, what at least appears that way? What is the compromise? Because here in Canada, misgendering and things of that nature is now considered a hate crime. So you have a lot of people who are feeling gaslit by the situation because what
Right.
started off as maybe we want to raise awareness and we want understanding and as an acceptance. Some
Hmm.
people are starting to view that as you went from just want to be a part of everyone else and now you're telling people what to think, and there's a confusion that all we want is for children to be children and have a regular childhood, whatever the family decides that is. And if when you want to have adult conversations, because sexuality in a lot of ways is an adult conversation, let's wait until we're adults, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, some of it obviously has to be talked about, at certain ages with girls and with boys, because of maturity levels and changes with your body. Those are specific sexuality changes that have to be talked about. But like, things that are voluntary, do we really have to talk about that before they can cognitively understand that? Like, as somebody who is in graduate school studying psychology, like, it's going to take them till about 18 years old before those, even beyond it, sometimes even beyond 20, before those receptors start binding to have a full understanding. So it makes me wonder how much of it is brainwashing and how much of it is really they feel that way.
Because you want to be protective of your child because your child is a responsibility of the parents. One thing that I did notice, the difference between America and the States, is that you have in your constitution, you have the freedom of speech built into it, where in
Yep.
our charter, we don't have it built into it. So that's where it's a little bit different, where the Canadians are looking at our American counterparts and saying that, hey, they have the right because it's written in there to say these things versus in Canada we don't have that right. But I think the conversation is needed, especially if they're trying to understand each other instead of saying that no, this is wrong, no, this is right. It's just no, we want to understand, but you're putting children in this situation which could be wrong, and you have a daughter. So what is your outlook on maybe what is happening and what the future holds for her and your family, as well as other families as well?
That's something that I've really been thinking hard about. And I mean, that's actually a great question because we were kind of talking about it. I mean, for the whole 12 hours my husband was back in town before he had to catch a flight and leave for work again. We were kind of talking about that because our daughter, she kind of re-injured her shoulder, and so we're like, all right, let's just take a year off a chair. And so we decided to do that. Kind of, we talked to physical therapy, all that, and occupational, all that. They're not occupational, orthopedic. They all said that, just give it, let her take the summer off, all that. Well, then we started really talking about, like, okay, we need to start kind of looking at society as a whole and how things are. And there are a lot of males that she works with. And I know that a big thing in the States, I don't know if y'all kind of deal with this in Canada, but SA with children is a really big thing. And that is something that my husband and I have been kind of tossing around, is like, well, this is happening in the world, but now our daughter's also involved in a co-ed sport. And there are some people, unfortunately, that take advantage of the freedoms that they have in the United States. And then that's whenever they become what we call predators. And then that's whenever our children become victims. And so it's like, do we let her stay and cheer with those coaches? Do we trust them? How, like, what do we know is going on behind those curtains at competitions, whenever we aren't around? What's going on in those private sessions when they're tumbling and flying, what that we don't see, you know what I mean? Like, you hear so many horror stories, and it's things like that. And then now to add this into the mix, so it's a real rock and hard place, and homeschool is looking like a real nice option right now.
I think one thing you have to do is you always have to make sure that you trust the staff to have the best interest of your child. And I think for the most part, they're trying. But I
Right.
think the difficulty that they face is they're trying to make sure they're as balanced as possible. And for a lot of people, especially parents, it does seem that they're too much on the other side. Whereas as the adults, I think everyone could agree that you want to be respectful of the adults, but it's the space that you're creating for them, right? Like, yes, you can have assault in the various forms can happen anywhere with anyone,
Mhm. Absolutely.
but now you're creating potentially a situation where the guardians of these children are not comfortable with what's going
Right.
on, right? There's
Yeah.
anxiety, there's uncertainty, and now they're saying that what reassure me, help me to understand that you have my child's best intentions in mind and safety in mind because this is what I think and this is what I feel. Is that where you think like the families are coming from?
I mean, yeah, I really think that a lot of us send our kids to school expecting the faculty to do what's right for our children. And a lot of us are being blindsided every single day. And a lot of us are just outraged by some of the decisions that they've been making. And, it's really, I think another thing that is just really baffling to a lot of us is, it's like, how did all of, like, we're from the South, and so, Southerners are thick, and we're very thick in our roots and our beliefs. And how did all of this instability trickle through our thick roots and our thick heritages? You know what I mean? And it's not that we're ignorant to, society or to other people's beliefs, or what the world is like now. It's just, let us let like you said, let our children be children for now, and then let them make decisions when they understand and when they get older. These are adult things that people are pushing on to children who can't even figure out if they want to play video games or spend the night with their freaking friend next weekend. Like, come on. I can barely get the child to put her freaking towel away when she's done showering, and you want me to, like, figure her life out? Like,
What do you think it's going to go from here because your perspective is a lot different than mine where I'm a single person, I don't have children. So I'm on the outside looking in hoping to help people find the balance whereas this is a direct impact for you. So what do you think the future is for those who have young children with their families that are that they're raising?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. The only thing that I can do is live day to day. Everything changes every day, every second, every minute. Like I've literally given up because I can't keep up. I hate to say that. And, most Americans will be like, burn her at the stake, whatever. She's not a true American, but it's not that. It's just I've given up because I can't keep up anymore. And like I will admit I'm a little afraid for the future, but the only thing that I can do is do my best as a parent and just make sure that I shield my daughter from the things that I know are going to be harmful to her. And when the time is right, we'll get there. If she has questions, we're not going to gaslight her and leave her in the dark, obviously. But at the same time, we're not going to open up the door for unnecessary questions on things that she's not going to understand. So
Is
to answer
there
your question, I don't know what the future holds. The only thing that I know is that it's either going to get really weird or it's going to level out. I have a feeling it's going to get really weird before it levels out, but I don't know what the future holds, and I think that's where a lot of people are kind of I think that's why a lot of people are upset is they don't know what the future holds, and it's scary.
Yeah, and then you have the fact that maybe a lot of the parents didn't think that they would be in a position to have that conversation so early,
Right,
right?
exactly. Because yeah, you take it, I'm 37 now, so let's take it 27 years ago when I was her age. Like this wasn't a conversation that my parents were going to have with me at 27 years old, like that's a whole different podcast we've already touched on, but like that's not something that I don't know. I know that it was a thing then. It wasn't widely talked about and it wasn't widely accepted like it is now. And so because it is widely accepted, it's talked about more. And we have a lot of people that are like, oh, get over it, get over it, get over it. And it's like, well, when bad things are happening to children left and right, I can't really get over it. I kind of have to be the helicopter parent. And back in the day, if you were called a helicopter parent, it was an insult. But nowadays, if you're a helicopter parent, you're doing your job. And that's sad. Like that's really how the reality is in the United States. And I feel like there are a lot of moms that are going to disagree with me, but I feel like there's so many more that would be like spot on 100%.
And I think that to your point, even if they're not ready, and maybe that's why the future is so uncertain, right? Because there isn't, at least here in Canada, it's not like it's a timeline curriculum. Like I remember because I'm close to your age as well. When I look back on it, anything that was like sexual in nature
Right.
was more so like a late elementary, early high school conversation,
Right. Like fifth grade was
right?
when we got to talk, and then they got into sex
Hmm.
ed like in the middle school. And yeah, yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so it wasn't so the more graphic or the more detailed conversation was later on in high school. So you're probably around 13, 14. So
Yeah,
it is still quite young, right? But at least everyone knew, like the parents knew, aha, when my child is approaching high school, this conversation is going to happen. When they're in high school, it's going to
exactly.
be this conversation, right?
And that's another thing is that like people are being forced to have conversations with their kids about things before they're even hitting certain levels to even understand why somebody would think in that sexual nature.
It's a whole preparation thing, and you want to be as prepared as possible. And I think if there's at least a timeline, like go to the parents and say, hey, this is part of the curriculum, because there's parent teacher meetings, I'm guessing still, and just say, hey, this is what we're going to introduce. Along with sexuality, you're going to have this types of conversation, that type of conversation. So everyone is prepared because it does seem like a lot of the parents are caught off guard with what is being taught. And there's some parents who are saying that their child is being actively told to hide it from their parents. So you also have that issue as well.
That's something that I have heard has been happening. That's not happening here in our schools, not that I know of, luckily, but um Unfortunately, like I said before, anything happens at all times. We never know when things are going to change. So we kind of always have to be two steps ahead of everybody else. And like I've had to have conversations with my daughter already that I shouldn't have to have with her until she's probably 11 years old, just because things are different. Society's different. And I don't want anybody to scare her. I want her to be very aware of things. And I've heard horror stories of how they like teach things now. And I'm like, you ain't scaring my child.
So, Ashley, as we close, what advice do you want to give to, let's say, young mothers and fathers, young parents out there who are raising young children and want to make sure that they're as prepared as possible for the ever changing type of conversation when it comes to sexuality and different genders and stuff like that?
So obviously, always be very transparent, be very open, make sure that you and your partner have specific guidelines set, that y'all have boundaries set, that y'all have, um, a basically, I guess, an agenda of how you want to talk to your children about it. If you're a single parent, see if you have another resource, such as like a sister or a brother, or, maybe a parent, somebody else that can potentially help you. But just always make sure you have a support system. Always make sure you're being transparent. Make sure you're communicating with your children, and never lie to them. If they have questions, tell them. It might be beyond them, but it's better that they learn it from you than learning it on the streets or from somebody else, because 9 out of 10 times they're going to get the wrong information. And then that's whenever you start having problems. So you need to be very open with your kids. Like, we are living in a world now where transparency is so important. If you want to protect your children, you need to be transparent with them. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. And unfortunately, we have to be transparent at a younger age.